Hey there, race fans. It's Race Day Top 5 with me, Frank 5. Daytona Speed Weeks, the week that kicks off the brand new season with the biggest race of the year, the Daytona 500. Speed Weeks is when all the teams come in, prep their cars with qualifying, duels, and practices to get them ready for Sunday's big race. And we had two big events that happened the previous two nights, setting the front row and setting the field for the Great American Race. Let's get into all that went down Wednesday night and last night. Number 1, Hendrick Motorsports sweeps the front row once again. Hendrick will have two of their drivers on the front row for the Daytona 500, and it'll be Alex Bowman, who won the pole, and Kyle Larson, the 2021 champion and defending Daytona 500 pole sitter. They're both on the front row for this year's Great American Race. Fun fact, actually, Bowman and Larson were on the front row last year, but this time they flip-flopped the positions. Larson was first last year, Bowman was second. Now this year they've kind of reversed that. It's Bowman first, Larson second. But once again, Hendrick Motorsports dominant in qualifying, and Alex Bowman also very strong in qualifying. This is now the 6th consecutive season he's on the front row for the Great American Race. Ever since he joined Hendrick in 2018, he's been on the front row. Won the pole in 2018, second in 2019, second in 2020, pole in 2021, second last year, first this year. There's just something about that 4018 that just always nails it. Or like Alex Bowman, like behind the wheel, whether it was the 88 or 48, there's just something about them when they nail it at qualifying. They always find that speed to put themselves on the front row for the Great American Race. And I was a little bit intrigued by this year's qualifying for Bowman because he's got a brand new crew chief in Blake Harris. It's no longer Greg Ives. Seems like they don't miss the magic when it comes to qualifying on the front row. They did a really good job, and last night they took it easy in their qualifying race. They ran up front for fuel laps and then quickly dropped to the back when they saw things were getting a little too crazy. Bowman did not want to take a chance to wreck that car because if you wreck the car, you got to drop to the rear of the field for the start of Sunday's race. So Bowman took the quick approach and jumped out of line and got out of there as quick as he could. He did hang in the back with some Chevys for the latter half of the race after pit stops, but just to trying to learn how his car was going to draft. But for the most part, they kept the car clean and they're on the front row for the Great American Race. Kyle Larson, who won the pole last year, ran well in his qualifying race last night. They finished in the lower half of the top 10. It was getting a little too hectic at the end, and I was looking at the television thinking, Larson should get out of here because if you want to start in the front row, don't tear up this race car, get out of there. There was a quick moment where he nearly got his car wrecked, but thankfully he didn't. And both of them will still be on the front row for Sunday's race. The big question is, we saw how they kind of raced last night. How will they race come Sunday being on the front row? Well, they have practices coming up so they can work on the car and feel like how it's going to work in the draft. They'll draft with some of their Chevy guys, and then they'll see what they've got come Sunday. But once again, it's all Hendrick front row for the Great American Race. Number 2, a 7-time champ and an X Games star locked themselves in. On Wednesday qualifying, not only we were setting the front row for the Daytona 500, but we were trying to find out which two teams without a charter would be the fastest two in qualifying and lock themselves in. Well, that turned out to be 7-time NASCAR Cup champion Jimmy Johnson driving for Legacy Motor Club in the number 84 Carvana Chevrolet, and Travis Pastrana driving for 2311 Racing in a third car number 67, the Black Rifle Coffee Toyota. They have locked themselves into the field based on their qualifying speeds from Wednesday night. I think we all knew Jimmy Johnson was probably going to be one of the fastest two drivers to lock themselves on time because it's a Chevy. They've got, ECR engines, which qualify very well, and they're always so dominant on super speedways, especially when it comes to qualifying. It's done it the previous couple of years, and we all know how good Jimmy Johnson is. He actually admitted in his interview after he qualified, said, I thought I had an engine problem. I don't think Jimmy Johnson's realized that the cars that qualify on super speedways by themselves are way slower than the cars that we had a few years ago. The Gen 6 car, they qualified in about the 188, 191 mile an hour range. Now they're in the low 80s, high 170s. Yeah, that's the difference with this next gen car versus the old car. But when you get in a draft, it's a lot faster than you think. It'll be around 188 to at least 195 mile an hour range. But Jimmy Johnson was the fastest of those cars. The second fastest I mentioned, Travis Pastrana. A little bit surprised. I didn't think they would have the speed to make the race, considering that, again, there are a lot more Chevy teams that are open teams entered, and he was the lone Toyota. But 2311 put a lot of horsepower into that engine to make him go fast and be the second fastest guy to lock himself into the Great American Race. And we got a Maryland guy, and from the state of Maryland, we got a Maryland boy once again in the Daytona 500. And he did a relatively good job last night in his dual race, just hanging at the back of the pack and just learning how to draft, because he's done this before in Xfinity Series, but this is not the two-car tango. This is the Cup guys, and of course, these are brand new race cars. They're only year 2 of this new car. So he had to learn a lot last night. Didn't get caught up in an incident, but for the most part, he's in the Great American Race. Both of them are, and we'll see if Jimmy Johnson can maybe get his 3rd Harley J. Earl Trophy on Sunday, and maybe Travis Pastrana could be maybe the ultimate underdog. But we have a 7-time champ and an X Games star in the Great American Race. Number 3, Ford sweeps the duels. Boy, those Fords are really fast at Daytona and Talladega. Last night, Joey Logano and Eric Almirola won both of their dual 150 races and the Blue Green Vacations duel at Daytona, setting themselves up for the 3rd and 4th starting positions for Sunday's race. Joey Logano was pretty, strong in the first duel after Alex Bowman got out of there quickly, and he was pretty much battling it out with all his Ford compadres, his teammate Ryan Blaney, Chris Buescher, Kevin Harvick, Michael McDowell, etc. But they also had some challenges at times from the Toyotas of Christopher Bell and Bubba Wallace. And in the end, Bell tried to make a pass by Joey Logano on the outside coming off a 4 in the last lap of the duel, but Logano had a better push from behind by his teammate Ryan Blaney, and Logano beat out Bell and Blaney and Chris Buescher and Michael McDowell to win the duel. Joey Logano, very, very strong, of course, the defending Cup champion, would like to get his 2nd Harley J. Earl Trophy on his way to trying to win his 3rd next NASCAR Cup championship. Very strong 22 Penske car, I gotta say. He was really, really fast. And Eric Almirola, a year ago, we thought it was his final speed weeks, but he's back for 2 more years, at the very least, with Stonehouse Racing, and he had a very good race car last night. Pretty much stayed top 5 the entire duel. I don't think he fell as low as 5th at all in that race. That car was so strong. This guy wants to make up for the one that got away in 2018, the Daytona 500. Almirola actually won a duel back in 2021, the first duel, and had very good car that week, but he got taken out early, that big wreck before the rain came in 2021. But he had a very good car last night, battling it out a lot, working with his fellow Ford compadres like Austin Cindric and his teammate Ryan Preece and Chase Briscoe. And at the end, Almirola was able to hold off Austin Cindric, Chase Elliott, Brad Keselowski, and Corey LaJoie to win the duel. Those Fords are very, very strong. And also, the Fords seem to get it right when it comes to pit stops. In the first duel, the Chevys pitted way earlier than the Fords and the miscellaneous Toyotas that were in that race. About 10, 12 laps earlier, the Fords pit later, and they get a bigger lead ahead of those Chevys after that with the Toyotas mixed in. And I'm like, why is Ford so good at executing this and the Chevys aren't? Well, maybe next time the Chevys should probably pit earlier before the Fords, but not too early. 2 to 3 laps would be a better idea, not 10 to 12 laps, because then you're going to lose time quickly, and they never caught up to the Fords at the very end of that first race. The second race was different because we had a couple cautions, but for the most part, the Fords were once again very, very strong, and I've got a good feeling that Joey Logano and Eric Almirola will be part of the conversation coming down to the wire at the end of the Daytona 500 on Sunday. Number 4, racing your way in. Boy, it's quite a joy. And last night, 2 drivers were able to pull it off. In race number 1, Zane Smith, the defending NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series champion, driving a 3rd Front Row Motorsports car, raced his way into the Daytona 500 by hanging with the leaders the entire time and beating out his competition, which was Chandler Smith, in a 3rd colleague entry to make the Great American Race. Zane Smith has been in a Cup car before last year, filling in for Chris Buescher at Gateway when Buescher couldn't go because of COVID. Zane Smith got the chance to ride and did a relatively good job. And this year, he's not only trying to defend his truck title, but he's going to run a couple of Cup races for Front Row Motorsports, one in this 36 car, and then he's going to run a few more races in the 38 car this year. I know that story's come out and bothered a couple people like fans of Todd Gilliland, but Gilliland's filled up a couple races already, with the lone exception being Talladega. But aside from that, Zane Smith had to finish ahead of Chandler Smith or hope Jimmy Johnson raced his way in to get Zane into the field because he was next in line on speed. Well, Zane Smith for the entire night was in the transfer spot and had a good race car. Couldn't really suck up and pass guys, but just hung up behind the leaders in the Ford camp at the very end of that race to get himself into the Great American Race. And he's done that, and he's going to get the chance to race in the Daytona 500 on Sunday. Actually, fun fact, we've got our defending Cup champion, our defending Xfinity champion, and our defending truck champion from last year all in the Great American Race Sunday, something that's never happened before. Joey Logano, Cup champ, Ty Gibbs, Xfinity champ, now full-time Cup, Zane Smith for a few races, and defending truck champ, he's in the race. So a great job by Zane Smith. Chandler Smith, unfortunately, doesn't make it because they had problems with their engine in qualifying on Wednesday, and they were the slowest car out of the 41 that qualified, and he will not make the race, but he does have the Xfinity Championship to run for. I mean, the other thing, he got caught for speeding on his pit stop, which he shouldn't, the one thing you were worried about is speeding on pit road, and unfortunately got him. And in race number 2, Connor Daly for the Money Team Racing in a 1 in a million shot made the Great American Race. Literally, that team has been through a roller coaster since Wednesday night qualifying. They never got to qualify because there's something wrong with the oil wire or something with the engine. So we couldn't set a lap. And before we even got going, when they were going on pit road to check their speed, the back end of the car was bobbing up and down like it was on a pogo stick. And I'm like, what is going on with that car? And right away, they lost the draft. They caught a caution when a side window from Justin Haley came loose. He caught back up. He lost the draft. And then we had a caution that took out a couple guys, including his competition, Austin Hill, in the 62 car. And that locked Connor Daly into the Great American Race. He will be in the Daytona 500. And Travis Pastrana admitted, actually, after he made the race, my goal next is to help my buddy Connor Daly make the 500. Well, Connor Daly made it, but it wasn't because of Pastrana. It's because of unfortunate circumstances. But nonetheless, Daly, with all those issues, made the 500. That's a pretty incredible story, shall we say. It'll be his second Cup start. Money Team made it last year with Kaz Grala behind the wheel, and now Connor Daly is in the Great American Race. Unfortunately, Austin Hill, he's out of it because he got caught up in a wreck on the backstretch that I'm going to get into in a moment. They were in the transfer spot the entire time until that wreck, and when they got caught up, the right front was just skewed into the right. The toe link was broken, and they had to take it to the garage. And unfortunately, they will not make the Great American Race. 2 of the last 3 years, that 62 team that has always run well in super speedways doesn't make the Daytona 500. It kind of sucks because the little team that can always put up a fight. Like they last year with Noah Gragson, they ran top 10 the entire day until they got caught up with about 10 laps to go in a wreck in the Trials. It sucks. So Austin Hill and Chandler Smith aren't in the show, but Zane Smith and Connor Daly are. And number 5, big wreck on the backstretch in duel number 2. Takes out a couple guys and ruins perhaps your best chance at the Daytona 500. That happened to Kyle Busch in the 8 car, who was leading his duel on the backstretch, pretty much dominant the entire duel. He was the control car ahead of guys like Daniel Suarez, Kyle Larson, Eric Almirola, Austin Cindric, Brad Keselowski, Chase Elliott, Denny Hamlin, and others. While on the backstretch with about 20 laps to go, or 21 to go, Daniel Suarez is bump drafting Kyle Busch, which, okay, you can, but they logged bumpers and hooked Kyle Busch straight into the right and into the wall, taking him out of the duel, and there was an accordion effect behind that took out other guys, Riley Herbst, Travis Pastrana, and Austin Hill, that knocked him out of the race. Kyle Busch was not happy on his radio. He said, that was a Daytona 500 car. What he means by that is that was a car that could win the Daytona 500. And he's not wrong. That car was so strong out front and even behind guys that he was behind for a while. It could suck up and launch to the front. It had good speed in it. He had a good race car capable of winning the race. But now they're in a situation where they have to go to a backup car. But I think Daniel Suarez made an enemy in Kyle Busch with that move last night. I know it's a Chevy, but at the same time, you don't want to rattle Kyle Busch's cage. And his cage got pretty rattled last night, knowing how good that car was and how capable it was of winning the 500. We won't know with that car anymore now that it's junked, so we'll see what he can do with the backup car in these practice sessions leading up to Sunday. If the car has that speed that it had Thursday night, then Kyle Busch still has a chance. If not, it's going to be an uphill battle. But it's just unfortunate because, his first actual weekend with the new team and everything, he had the speed in that car to win this race. We'll see if he has it in that backup car for Sunday, but I think it's going to be an uphill climb for that 8 car. So the festivities of setting the field for the 500 for the Cup Series is officially in the books. And tonight, the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series kicks off their season with the NextEra Energy 250 at Daytona. I can't wait for this race to see the veterans of our sport like Matt Crafton and Grant Enfinger going at it with young stars like Chase Purdy, Zane Smith, our defending truck champion, Ben Rhodes, Ty Majeski, Haley Deegan, Raja Caruth. It's going to be a really fun race tonight. Cannot wait for that. It'll be on FS1. Then tomorrow, the Xfinity Series, names are made. They'll kick off their season with the Beef It's What's for Dinner 300 at Daytona, 5 p.m. Eastern on FS1. And of course, Sunday is the big day, the Daytona 500. Cannot wait for the Speedways to continue on with the truck race tonight and the Xfinity race tomorrow. I'll recap both of those races tomorrow night because it's going to be a lot of process before I edit it and put it down to a video. But hope you enjoyed this video. The 500 field is officially set. Let me know what you thought about qualifying and the duels as well. But thank you so much for watching. Subscribe, like. Congrats to Hendrick on the front row with Alex Bowman and Kyle Larson. And congrats to Joey Logano, Eric Almirola winning their duels. And to Zane Smith, Connor Daly, Jimmy Johnson, and Travis Pastrana on making the Daytona 500. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody, and let's go racing!